30th of August in 1985, I stood at the edge of a diving board or the top of a slide at Durban's Waterworld, 20 meters above a pool. I'd been asked to be a model for a television commercial for a water park that was going to be opening in Pretoria. And I was a student at the time. I knew there was something not right. I dived 15 times already during the day, but something was different. Anyway, the clapperboard sounded and I dived. And little did I know that in a 3-hour lunch break that they'd given us on the day, someone had drained the water out the swimming pool. And from 20 meters high, the water was only just less than a meter deep. And I hit my head on the bottom of the pool and I broke my neck. I was 23. That was 35 years ago. My life really changed. And to cope, I had to cope. I had to change. Now you know why I had to cope and had to change. And this is how. And I'll get to the fishing side soon, and it'll all make sense. Maria, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to your IMM members and friends today. I think I better show some proof that I'm a wheelchair user. So I'll just take a step back and show you that I'm still using my wheelchair for my mobility. But let me give you a little bit of a background. I was very privileged to have gone to a good junior school. I went to Highbury. That's where I started fly fishing. And the story out of that is that I first heard about fly fishing when I was at Highbury, and I was very grateful to receive my first fly fishing kit from my gran and grandpa, and entered the long cast competition in my final year at Highbury. And my folks drove all the way from Ladysmith to come and see me perform in the long cast competition, and I came last. But there's a theory behind this. I didn't purposely come last, but you'll soon realize when I get into my story about the analogy of fly fishing to good business strategy, that it's not how long you cast as to how successful you are. After Highbury, I was very privileged to go to Hilton, UCT, and then the Army. After the Army, I ran the Comrades Marathon. I played good tennis. I was in the first division hockey, and then I studied an IMM at the Natal Technikon. And it was in this time that I had my accident. Let me tell you a little bit about something that happened in the Army. Now, many of us that did go to the Army in the 80s don't really like to talk about it, but it is relevant to a message I want to relay today. I was at Oudtshoorn Infantry School. I became a lieutenant, and then I did a parabat course, and then I was deployed to the Bushman Trackers. And this was an elite tracking battalion on the Angolan border. And before I left, I had a chance to go home and say goodbye to my parents. And my dad pulled me aside one day and he said, just before I left, and he said, you know, just remember, war is fought between two countries where the politicians of the day and the governments of the day don't agree with each other. And so they take to arms. And, you know, just remember, if you do kill somebody, you'll regret it one day. The fact you've got a uniform and a weapon doesn't give you a license to kill anybody. I thought about this carefully, and he said to me, it will change your life and you will have regrets. So I wondered how I was going to honor what my dad requested. And I remember one day, we were now on our first patrol going out with this group of Bushman trackers, and I worked it out. I took the firing pin out of my rifle and I stood on the seat of this biffle and threw it as far as I could into the bush. And so from then on, in 11 contacts, which we called them, or skirmishes with the SWAPO insurgents, I had no firing pin. I couldn't ignite a bullet at all. and found a way of getting through those 9 months with the Bushman trackers without ever shooting a bullet. And the lesson learned from that, when I came to try and understand, well, what did that mean to me? I did, after a number of months, having got home, sat down with my dad and I told him the story, and we both had a good cry, and I was very proud to have honored his request. Is that quite often, and especially after my accident, I had a hell of a lot to get through, a hell of a lot to deal with, is your mouth and what you say is often your firing pin. And so a lesson that I've taken out of that for all of my life until now, and I hope further, is, be careful what you say, because it hurts people. It might kill people's souls. It might kill friendships. And so remove your firing pin from your mouth. And that was a very significant lesson. And so back to my accident. I was carted off to Addington Hospital, and after a couple of days, after ICU, the surgeon came to the side of my bed, and he said, introduced himself, and he said, you're going to be a quadriplegic for the rest of your life. Now, I couldn't spell the word quadriplegic. I do recall many, many years later, when I was the CEO of QASA, the Quad Para Association of South Africa, I had to judge, one of my privileges in that position was I had to judge the Miss Benoni beauty contest held in Benoni. And we were down to the last 3 beautiful young ladies. They were wearing a 2-piece bikini, and there wasn't much to choose between them. So we thought the best way of finding a winner was just to ask them each a question. And so I asked the question, and in fact, Miss Benoni, the beneficiary of the Miss Benoni beauty contest was the Quadriplegic Association at the time. So I said to the young poppy there, who is the beneficiary of the Miss Benoni competition? And she put her hand up, and well, I said, well, you're the only one there, you're going to have to answer the question. And she said, it's the quadrupiglets. And then I knew, okay, the penny dropped. Nobody really knows what a quadriplegic is until, of course, Christopher Reeve had his accident and then popularized the word quadriplegic and quadriplegia, and everybody understood what it is all about. So the doctor then said, as a quadriplegic, you won't be able to do this, and you won't be able to do that. You won't participate here, and you won't be able to participate there. And so not much to look forward to. And then an occupational therapist came to see me not long after and said, you're going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. And I think it's not the sentence that anybody ever wants to hear. And you won't be able to go here, and you won't be able to go there, and you will be very limited, and you will be bound and confined. And those are words that people commonly use for wheelchair users. And I try to contemplate what those 2 things meant, a quadriplegic and a wheelchair user. And I worked out, and I decided that I would tell my quadriplegia every day what it has to cope with, and it better come along with the journey. And with a wheelchair is, I know where I want to go, and so choose the right wheelchair, the right configuration, the right size, and it's going to take me there. And so I decided I was not going to be bound or confined by a wheelchair. It was going to be my tool of freedom, and I was going to use it to be mobile, not to be bound and confined. And I think that was well worked out very soon in my life. And then, of course, I had hundreds of visitors that clogged the halls and filled up the ward that I was in, and it tired me out, and I lost a bit of focus, although I did enjoy the compassion and the support. So I chatted with some of my friends, or many of them, and said, come on, guys, let's amortize the time you're giving me over the next many years, because I'm going to need your support, I'm going to need your visitation, and I'm going to need every part of you on this journey on the way forward. So leave me now, let me do my rehabilitation. And wow, to this day, I still have my regular visitors from those same people, and the amortizing of their time is still present today, from which I'm very grateful. So if there's a lesson there for you, think about it. So I guess being a quadriplegic and a wheelchair user and a person with a disability, the only way to go forward is to look for what are the opportunities that you can look for and have. Well, thank goodness I went back to Natal Technikon and completed my IMM, albeit with tremendous classmate support and help, getting me up and down stairs and in and out of classrooms and assisting me with taking notes. And so I was very proud to have an IMM Marketing Management diploma. We sued the water world. It was the obvious thing to do, although it wasn't a constructive process. And I remember going with my parents, driving from Kloof to Pietermaritzburg in the car, and on our way on a billboard on an electrical pole, it said, "Quadriplegic sues for 6 million," in the Natal Mercury. And we got to the Supreme Court building, and I just sat and looked around at everybody. And I looked at my parents, and they were tremendously stressed. And I contemplated what the hell we were doing here. And there was the insurance company that was there that was underwriting the water world. And I called them across and I said, "What's the public liability?" And they gave me the figure on this. And I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll take it." So I called our attorney and I said, "I would like to settle out of court. I'm going to take the public liability." It wasn't a hell of a lot. It was a sum of cash, under 100,000 Rand actually. And said to my folks, "Come on, get in the car, let's go home." When we were driving home and getting back to Kloof again, the Daily News poster was up on the pole, and it says, "Waterworld victim settles out of court." So little did I know how profound those two posters would be, because it wasn't a week later that I got a call from the Trust Bank that said to me, "Ari, we would like to invite you to a special lunch." And I said, okay. I came down there and they presented me with the leather-bound checkbook and an overdraft for 200,000 Rand. The next week, I was called by the Standard Bank and they said, "We'd like to invite you to a function." And I had hardly a bean to my name, and I had an overdraft of 450,000 Rand. So that was a wonderful start to my business career, and it gave me an opportunity to start my first business. If I look at some of the other opportunities that I've had as a wheelchair user, I have done 2 New York marathons. I managed to get some friends to assist me to adapt a quad bike, and I have ridden an adapted quad bike 16 times in an event called Quads for Quads, which is an off-road motorbike event from Johannesburg to Durban, 1,000 kilometers in 4 days, which I've done 16 times. What an incredible adventure. I've had lunch with Nelson Mandela, and I have been to see Christopher Reeve and met him after he had his accident a few times in New York. And what came out of my engagement with Christopher Reeve was his whole mission in life was to find a way of walking again. And mine wasn't. I wanted to find a way of integrating and being functional. And so we had our differences, but we learned from each other. I also realized that Over and above having an IMM, which was very useful, I needed some quick skills to mitigate my disability so that people would realize I would be useful in a workplace. And so there were two things that I learned to do quite well and still stand me in good stead now. And the first was I got to master voice-activated software, which means that I can type at about 100 words a minute with 100% accuracy. And I learned to speed read, which means I can read at about 1,000 words a minute. And to give you an example of what that means is I can read sort of any size book in an hour. So I can go to exclusive books, buy a cup of coffee, and read a book in an hour and put it back on the shelf if I want to. So let me tell you a little bit about my business background. I started a company called Mark Plan Designs, which made signs. It was a brokerage for signage. Also felt that there was a need to have parallel income as well as having a full-time business. As an investment, call it that. So a friend and I bought the franchise of a frozen yogurt company called Aylesbury. After that, we did very well. We sold the business. We shouldn't have, but we did. And then we started a little bakery called Bread and Bun, where we lost everything that we made. And then after that, we recovered by opening another ice cream shop, which we knew a lot about soft serve now, called the Scoop and Twirl, and it did very well. So I thought it was quite important, over and above deploying my full day into my own full-time business, parallel income was quite important. After that, I decided to get involved with the Quadriplegic Association of South Africa, and eventually I was appointed as the CEO of Quasar. The tempo was hectic. If I tell you that as a quadriplegic, I would be traveling for 20 years, 20 days a month away from home, it was unbelievable. I really loved that time. I never saw any of the you can't do this, you can't do that. And I guess I became a bit obsessive about working hard, and it was my crutch for coping with disability. Some of the things that made the organization successful, which I believed in and implemented, was good compliance and sustainability. So let me give you an example of one of the sort of strategies that we deployed in the organization that worked for us. There was a company, the biggest wheelchair manufacturing business in the country. We went to see them and we negotiated to own 7% of the biggest wheelchair manufacturing business. Now that made absolute sense. We were 6,000 members that were members of the organization. We all use wheelchairs, and so we brought a whole new customer base to this business. At the same time, all members of Quasar would get less 5%, and the organization, because it now had the Quadriplegic Association as a shareholder, then won most of the government tenders, and we would get 2 dividends a year. So that's how we dealt with sustainability. It wasn't just about writing letters to donors, shaking tins and selling Boerewors rolls for the sustainability of the organization. Some of the things I really enjoyed being the CEO of Quasar was I was very proud to have been appointed as the World Spinal Cord Injury Day Ambassador. I did lots of international travel and got recognized for that. And I now serve on the Presidential Working Group on Disability that's advising the President on disability. I've now retired, and it was time to get back on the water. I had time to think, and I guess I would be dishonest with myself if I didn't realize that along this journey, I probably suffered with PSTD. And I needed to deal with that. And I think getting back to fly fishing was my way. Just to show you, at the moment, I'm reading a book called Time to Think by Nancy Klein. This is an incredible read. And fishing gave me a new purpose, and it allowed me to work out this analogy, which I'm going to talk about now and share my screen. Maria, can I go ahead and share screen?
Please go ahead, Ari.
Okay, so I know you've heard a story, but it'll all fall together in the end. And I've spent a lot of time on the water fly fishing. And for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to tell you about the analogy of fly fishing to good business strategy and market penetration. I'm going to have a sip of water whilst you read that and I catch my breath. Okay, I'm going to use a few keywords for today's presentation. Accessible environments, assessment, product and service, logistics, packaging and presentation, patience, negotiation, and relationships. Talking about accessible environments, universal access is critical for me, that a wheelchair user, circulation in society, and even on a farmer's water's edge. So a lot of people say, well, Ari, how do you fly fish? How do you get to the water's edge? Well, it's important for me to research where the accessible water is, which farms are accessible, which farmers groom their dams that I can get to fly fish. And I think I also, when I get onto the water or onto the jetty or onto the dam wall, I need to have a secure position in all the infrastructure. I need to be balanced, and I also need to be away from the risks of weather elements, the sun or the rain or the wind. So too in business, universal access is critical for your product and your service design. It's got to be accessible for all users. You must research for your intended market. The product or service must be accessible to all stakeholders. And how do you get to markets? Are they accessible to you? Those are decisions you have to make. In terms of assessment, always look at the environment around the water, the weather, look at the depth of the water, the structure of the water, the bugs and the insects on the water, the time of the year, the activity on the water. I can assure you that if you get onto the water and you take your rod out and you just start fishing, you're not going to get any success at all. So have a look at the structure. A fly fisherman will spend a lot of time just looking at the water and making decisions about where to cast and what fly to use. That is extremely critical. So too in business, understand the market and its needs, the pricing trends, consumer needs, and the competitors in the market. Your product or service. Are you using the right rod, the right length and weight for the dam structure, the right line, floating, intermediate, or sinking? What leader? So there are so many different rods you can choose from. A 9'5", a 10'4". Look at the dam structure. How far do you want to cast? You can have a floating line, an intermediate line, a sinking line. Then above the lines, you still have a leader, which is the last piece of line that you tie your fly on, and that has You get different lines for that. So lots of decisions to make about your product that you use when you get onto the dam. Do you have the right fly in your fly box for the conditions of the day to match the other bait on the water? Or do you have to tie a special fly pattern? So there are hundreds of flies you can choose from. And what do? You sit and you look at the bugs on the water. You want to compete with those bugs. They it's so important that the trout need to know that you're not artificial, that you're part of the bait on the water, the existing bait on the water. So too in business. Do you have the right product or service? Can you customize for their needs and requirements? Or do you have to have a bespoke product? Are you well priced? And have you got a competitive advantage? In terms of logistics, can you cast far enough, or do you trawl the edges? Do you need a float tube, waders, or is there a jetty into the water? So it's so important when you get to the water is not having to cast too far, or can you cast far enough, or do you just cast against the edges and see what trout is lurking around there? You get float tubes, you get waders. So do you want to float into the middle of the dam, or do you want to wade to waist deep to see what luck you'll have over there? If there's a jetty into the water, do you use the jetty, or do you stay on the dam wall? Those are decisions in terms of logistics you make as a fly fisherman. So too in business. Can you deliver the product or the service? Have you got the logistical infrastructure to service your customer? Can you diversify? Can you pivot and expand if necessary? Packaging and presentation. Is your casting technique right? Am I retrieving too fast, too slow? Am I getting the attention of the trout? There are so many different ways of retrieving, depending on the fly you're using. If you're using a certain fly, you might retrieve with 2 pulls, 2 short pulls, and a long pull, or 2 long pulls and a short pull, to try and simulate the conditions of the water. Try and match the bugs on the water and the other bait that's on the water to get the attention of the trout. So too, in business, is your product or service packaging attractive to your customer, and is your presentation better than your competitors? You've got to have a lot of patience as a fly fisherman. Do you have the patience to stay on the water all day, trying different flies, trying different patterns, trying different movements to attract trout? Fly fishing needs patience, casting different lengths at varying depths, and moving around the water structure. Patience always gives reward in fly fishing. So too in business, how patient are you with a deal and opportunity with your customer? Will you negotiate? Are you price flexible? Can you redesign and reinvent if necessary? And I'd say that this is a key slide for today's discussion. Negotiation. Do you keep or release? So there's a saying in fly fishing, catch and release. And I'll explain that now. So when you get a fish on, that's the call you make when a trout takes your fly. How do you react? Do you strike hard and reel in furiously, or do you play the fish slowly to the side? And that's a decision that many trout fishermen have to make. If you're going to strike hard and reel in furiously, you're going to injure the fish, and you're going to have to keep the fish. Do you keep the fish and eat it, or do you remove the fly gently and release back into the water, making sure that it survives? So you decide before, do you put a hook on that's got a barb on it, or do you use a hook that's barbless? And that sort of decision that you make is so important to know how you're going to treat the trout. Do you put it back in the water so you can catch it again another day, or do you try and catch as many trout as you can and take them home? I can assure you, in my experience, it's far cheaper to actually go to Pick and Pay and buy yourself some trout than it is to go and bag as many trout as you can on a farm. So do you treat your customer gently and retain your customer, or do you go for a once-off deal with maximum profit? Big decision that I think you should be considering. Is the cost of finding a new customer cheaper than retaining an existing customer? Talking about relationships, a fly fisherman decides in advance whether to fish for a bag count or to release. Many of us fly fishermen, when we go fishing, we've already made a decision. I'm not going to take anything out the water. Whatever I catch, I'm going to put back in the water. Or you go to a farm that's got a dam where the guy says, listen, you must keep what you catch. And so we make those sort of decisions in advance. If you release back in the water, then you'll catch the trout again. And if you keep the fish, you'll need to find another fish to catch. You'll need to find another dam to fish in. Work out your strategy for customer retention in advance and apply the necessary pricing and service levels. Are you a catch and release provider, or do you take every deal you can get and empty the dam and then look for new water? And the analogy of that is you'll be looking for new customers all the time. So let's try and understand your company. Does it reflect, if we had to tie a fly or have a fly that reflects your company or our company, does it reflect the business you're in and the people you serve? Does it reflect your ethics and your integrity? Does the fly that you use and tie, does it reflect the quality of your product and service? Does it reflect your value proposition? Does it reflect your involvement in your community? And if you get it right, and if so, if that fly which reflects your company, then there's no reason for not having a good day's fishing. I'll just show you one or two quick pictures. This was also a slide taken, the last photograph of me standing before my accident. That's having my accident and soon after in hospital. And then this quick slide, I'll tell you the top is before my accident. That was two pictures of in the army with the Bushman trackers. Another photograph when I was deployed to some special operations. As everybody, a lot of young kids are now writing matric at the moment. That's a picture of me when I was in matric, and that's a picture of me as a youngster having caught a fish. And in the bottom row, it's riding a quad bike, driving a rally car, my time with Christopher Reeve, and one of the fish that I did keep because I hurt the fish and couldn't put it back in the water. Okay, so I'm out of share screen now, and want to end off my talk. Many people go fishing all their lives without knowing that it's not fish that they're after. And I think that is certainly applies to me as a fly fisherman. So what do we take away from this talk of the analogy of fly fishing to good business strategy? Is have you got the right products and services in your fly box? And I'll hold this up. I hope you can all see. You know, there are so many flies you can use for fly fishing. And so you've got to have this product. All your products, are they the right products for the market and the customers that you have in your fly box? And then it is unfortunate in this time of COVID, many businesses suffered, but I think you've got to ask yourself the question, have you pivoted your business and your product and your service in order to survive? So let's take in the retail industry. Have you gone from retail to online? Has a restaurant gone from expecting you to come in to rather them being able to deliver? And if so, you'll survive. And if you don't consider pivoting, you probably won't. Also making a decision, if you're out there fly fishing, or if you have a business, do you keep and eat everything you catch, or do you catch and release? a very, very important decision to make. In all the years that I've been a person with a disability and my time in the disability sector, I got to meet hundreds and thousands of people with disabilities, of many different disabilities. And I coined a phrase which means so much to me. And I'll share it with you. If you can see, then you must have vision. If you can hear, then you must listen. And if you can walk, you must walk your talk. I hope I've influenced your Friday. Thank you. Dankie. Siyabonga.
Thank you, Ari.
Thank you so much, Ari. That was really insightful, and we really enjoyed it. And thank you for your time.
Okay, great. I'm open to questions. If I don't know if do you manage the muting, but no rabble rousing, and to the subject. I see some family and friends around, and so I'll take something constructive.
Ari, it's me. It's Kim. How are you?
Hello, Kim.
Are you well?
Yes, fine. Let's not get too personal. Yeah, you were going to ask a question.
No. I loved it, but I mean, that so the analogies were fantastic. So thank you for that. It was a lovely talk. I connected with it well. Thank you.
Yeah, hope I'll see you soon. Okay, Maria, I'm had some time with you and your members, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ari, for all your hard work. We really appreciate you coming here to talk to us today. Thank you for sharing your very inspirational story and, of course, your analogy to good business and fly fishing. If there are no further questions for Ari, enjoy the rest of your Friday, everybody.